This is Chris Kress with Worksoft, and we're going to have a webinar on testing smarter. How can we look at impact analysis to expose and mitigate risks and change management for SAP? So the big question people have is, what if you could predict the impact of change? Well, it's really hard to do, but sometimes we can with software. SAP touches everything. And with a constant stream of changes and release cycles, it can be difficult to effectively mitigate the impact of change on your business processes. Right? So in this webinar, we'll learn how SAP transports moving into quality environments are analyzed via Worksoft Impact, and reports or test coverage and gaps are identified. So to kind of help you predict what the change will be, because sometimes we don't really know what's in an SAP transport. So the agenda today, I'm going to go over a quick overview of what an SAP transport is and kind of where they come from to level set. I'm then going to look at the impact analysis technology, what results you get from that, and then we'll look at a demo. So where do these transports come from? There's two primary sources out there. One is SAP provided transports, and these are usually it's like service packs as people think about them. The other is customers actually modifying ABAP programs, and they get put into transports and moved to different systems. Now, obviously, there's other things that go in transports, but this is what we're focused on here. So if you think about your application server for SAP, it could be your ECC or S/4HANA. You've got a quality environment. So developers move their transports into there. You move SAP service packs into that environment. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to understand when we get these changes, say in the ABAP programs themselves, how does that affect our business process? What can we actually do with that? Because a lot of times the transports don't have very great descriptions, or if you get, say, a service pack from SAP, it's like 4,000 changes in it, so it's hard to know what's going on. So people have a lot of questions. Okay, when something moves into quality environment, quality teams and business need to understand what's actually in these transports. Does a transport from SAP actually change a part of SAP I use? I mean, because SAP is huge. Maybe it's modifying modules you're not even interested in. Okay. Do the changes from development break parts of my end-to-end process? If they're making an expansion, say, in some processes and that our custom development's doing, does that break the end-to-end process? Are there upstream and downstream unintended consequences? Okay. The other thing is, do I have an automated certified process to actually validate these changes? Whether they come from SAP or internally, we need to know that. And then what I found with some customers is they've been outrageously successful at building huge regression beds, but they need like 8 hours to run. And sometimes you just need to run just enough of your certified processes versus all of them to actually regress and figure out what's going on. Sometimes we want just enough. What's a subset of processes I should run to test this, and then I'll later do a full regression cycle itself. So how does the impact analysis technology work from Worksoft? And we'll basically figure out how do we address those questions on the previous slide. So first off is, what is Worksoft Impact? Okay. Worksoft Impact analyzes transports as are moved or transported into the quality environment, and then selects certified processes to run, which tests the impacted user interfaces, and then identifies gaps when there's no automation tests exist. Okay? So it's going to do two things. It's going to show us, based on the transport and the changes, what tests we should run and what gaps. The impact contains transports that perform the analysis of the transport and a web application server to present the results. So we do install ourselves into the SAP system to basically do the math. The impacted programs, transports, and web components are presented and selected for the selected transports. So you'll notice web components. That's what's new in this latest release of Impact. The most current version of Impact now includes SAP web-based user interfaces. So Impact cross-references certified processes and identifies tests for SAP GUI T-codes, which we've always done, but now SAP Web GUI, SAP Web Dynpro, and UI5 tiles. And so it's telling you what you should run of those tests along with your traditional SAP GUI T-code tests themselves. So excited about this, first to the market to actually present this out to customers to show the expansion and the great work my development teams have done. So why use Worksoft Impact? Well, quality teams need to understand what's inside a transport delivered by SAP. Like I mentioned before, a lot of times you don't know what's in there. There's like 2,000 changes, 4,000 changes, right? And quality teams ask, does this transport affect my existing business processes? So we need to understand like which T codes, which processes is this affecting itself? And then when custom code is created, quality teams to know if they can leverage their existing, if they leverage existing ABAP programs, do they have automation for that in place? Because many times you make a change to just a single part of SAP, or an SAP program calls another program and calls another program. And so you need to know, okay, what are the, do we have tests in place for that? Are there things that are being combined? To answer these questions, one big question, or to answer the question, one big thing is what are the gaps in my automated tests versus the changes in the transport? Are there things that are changing that I don't have automation for? I need to figure out the gap analysis. And then the last thing is if I can't run all my tests, what's the best subset to run given time constraints? So the way it actually works is we install our transport and we install the app server. And what we do is we look at the information in the transports and we find the different object types. And there's lots of object types in SAP. We include all the objects we find along the way. So we go up and down these chains of objects. And we drill up and down and find every object until we reach a parent program. And then we drill down those. Once we reach a parent node, we start the reverse process. So we actually start traversing a lot of code. We basically drill up and drill down till we find all the parents for everything that's been touched, and then figure those out. And there's basically 6 application layers, but there's thousands of objects out there. So an example of this, because that probably didn't make a lot of sense, is if we find something like an object, like the AOF data element or VBAC in the tables and that, what we're going to do is we're going to traverse all of the objects in this chain, and we use, there's the concept of where used graph. So where is this IDOC inputs used? Where is this MV45 used, right? And if you know anything about SAP, like a program, say MV45A, supports multiple T codes. It supports VAO1, VAO2, VAO3, and different things. So what we want to do is we do the analysis and say, what is one of these lower levels? We walk up and we look at the complete graph. We do a where used, where is this used, where is this used. We build all the math behind the scenes to figure out what's actually being affected in this. The output is then processed to figure out what's the impact UIs. So the new functionality based on that math is that we actually support all these new user interfaces. In the past, we supported T codes. So on the top, it didn't matter if you're an SAP GUI in the classic mode and one of the like trade show or one of those earlier themes, or you're running it on the right with the enable Fiori theme, where you're actually making the web GUI look a lot like the web page, the SAP GUI look a lot like the web pages. We've always done those. What we've expanded is where you have, say, Web Dynpro, you have old web GUI programs, or you have the UI5 running in the browser. So when you look at these newer applications, and if you can see here, I'm in Chrome, so I highlighted the SAP UI5 Inspector. You can see these are actually, it'll tell you if it's UI5 or it's Web Dynpro, it'll tell you the technology. We are now providing impact analysis and saying not only run these SAP GUI tests, but you can, these are your web-based test cases you need to run also. So we're not limited strictly to T codes, which is where most people live today. So Worksoft Impact now supports this. So the idea is we've upgraded our technology to support this. And when you look at this in the user interface, I'll do a demo a little later, it'll show you that we found there's like, in this analysis, we found 8 Fiori components. So we're now looking at anything in the underlying web technology. So if you think about the new Fiori user experience that people have, it can have, they may leverage some existing transactions and T codes. They may be using new Lighthouse apps and things like that. So we want to be able to identify not only the programs and the transactions, but also these other web components. So during the configuration of the transport analysis, you'll have the opportunity to select which of the transports you want to do. So we let you say, here's all the transports in your system. You're going to select which ones you're interested in doing analysis on. And then we will go through and look for all the certified processes and give you the gap analysis there. So operationally, what people tend to do is transports keep moving into the quality system, and they can be SAP, service pack, or your developer's code. And then as they land in there, we start doing the math on the back end, and then it shows up in the user interface to say, these are the transports that are there. You can actually search and say, tell me what's been included in the last 3 days or the last 6 months. And then you'll pick one, and we'll run it through the analysis itself. So a common question I get is, how is this different from BPCA, or Business Process Change Analyzer? So what I did is I took a nice definition from the SAP documentation on this. And Test Suite and Solution Manager supports test plans, manual tests, and automated tests. And they create them and run them and get reports. But there's a specific thing called BPCA. And so what it does is it looks at changes in the system, for example, service packs or custom development or add-ons installed. And then the change analyzer compares the objects in the transports to the objects in the T-bombs of the target system. So transaction bill of materials, T-bombs. So T-bombs are usually pretty complicated. There's several types of T-bombs. There's some packaged. There's called a semi-dynamic T-bomb, where you turn on some monitoring and Solution Manager, you get some SCMON data, and then calculates a semi-dynamic T-bomb, and then it maps it to the test cases and test plans that you have in Solution Manager. Or there's something called a dynamic T-bomb, in which you activate recording of T-bombs, you run your manual tests, maybe you've got your automated tests in Solution Manager, and then it's going to look at the where used clause is going to say what parts of the ABAP code and what's the stack and the SAP objects are you touching, and then it's going to create an analysis. So BPCA lives inside of Solution Manager specifically. It tries to map, your test case has an executable, and then it does require T-bombs. And what I found is a lot of customers say T-bombs are too much of a heavy lift, especially dynamic T-bombs, because that means I need to run every test to create a T-bomb, and then it tells me the subset of tests to run. So it's not as easy to operationalize. There's a lot more heavy lifting and moving parts compared to the way we do it ourselves. So once we do our stuff, okay, what is the result of impact? So what we will give you is we'll give you a list of the affected programs, transports, and web components that are inside of the selected transports. The certified processes should be run to validate the changes, and the cross-referencing of the STO3 data is presented. And then we'll tell you your test coverage by programs, transaction names, and we'll map that to your STO3, and then the web components. This is the new features, all the things about the web pages. Okay, we will then create an execution manager request for you, so those can actually be run. So you've got a subset of the test to run. So if you're looking at just running a risk-based test and I don't want to run my full regression, I select a couple transports and then calculates these as a subset of certified processes to run. Okay, and then you'll get impact analysis reports mapping the certified processes to the template. So you can see if a certified process fails, which transport is in it, or you can do the opposite. You can say, for a transport, what certified processes were used to validate that. So I'm going to switch over and actually, let's go look at the product. And everybody knows Chris can't type a password and talk at the same time. So what I've done is I've created an analysis, and I've got two things here. I've got a transport from SAP and some custom code. So I'll show you the analysis. I went through and I ran this analysis earlier so we can see the results. And I've also run the tests so you can see how the execution manager works. So I'll come back over here to the programs and transactions. I'll walk a little bit, couple steps backwards. So what happens is when you pick the transports, in my case I picked 3, 2 of them with custom code and 1 was an SAP service pack. So obviously the service packs affect a lot of programs. So this is all the programs that's affected. You can see as I scroll down, tons of them, right? And then these are the transactions. So these are what you traditionally think of in terms of T codes, like VAO2 ran 10,000 times, VLO2N 292,000 times. I've got the STO3 data. So I can say these T codes were changed, but by looking at the STO3, I'll know which ones were actually used and which ones weren't. So, if I don't have tests for things that I run maybe 4 times, maybe that's not so important. But if I look at the things that I'm running, hundreds of thousands of times, okay, these are the things that are really important to me. So it lets me understand that. Now also it says this contains 2,636 Fiori components. So this actually has components that are affect on web pages. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see when we did the math. So the first step we did is we analyzed all these components that were set up and down the graph. And then Impact says, okay, for your certified processes, okay, which subset of processes should I actually run? So I can see here that I've got processes, these Web GUI tests, these Fiori tests. I can see that there's some STO3 data on these, so these are actually being used. So when I look at these tests here, they're in the Fiori project Web GUI processes. If I come over to Certify, oops, I got to relog in. Type the password right the second time, perfect. So if I look in Certify, I can see I've got different test cases. I've got some of these that are testing these different processes. If I look at the steps, these are doing verifies and selects from different components. If I look at the UI5, I can see there's like a press of a go button. So normally in the previous versions, all of these test cases would be T codes and SAP GUI. But now the selected ones are actually web. So I can see here the press of the go button. So if I do an edit object, what you'll see here is this is actually a web test. So this object is an edit object for web, and there's a button that was clicked, and there's some instances there. So what we found here is this was an HTML push button. So Impact Analysis now not only does SAP GUI transactions, but it's going to cross-reference your web pages that are hitting these SAP ABAP code in the background. So this test case has no T codes, no SAP GUI. It's strictly browser-based, and that's what we're going to see here. Okay? So if we go look into SAP, what we'll see is we've got the UI5 Inspector, and it says this is using UI5 1.44. If I go into one of these pages, it would have like a go button and such. What you'll see is when you shadow over this inspector, it's going to tell you, are you using UI5? Is this a Dynpro page, or is this an SAP web page? So if you're wondering what technology is behind these things in the browsers, you can actually see that through the UI5 Inspector. It'll tell you the different versions and what's there. And so what's interesting is these test cases are now included in the impact analysis. So that's why in this list of programs, we not only see T-code tests, we see these based on browsers themselves. And then the next thing we'll see is actually the test coverage. So as this loads, what we see here is 3 areas. We've got program names, so these are SAP programs. We've got transactions, and then we've got the Fiori components. So when I look at these down here, and I look at these components, you'll see they have names. Names are like GL, DPO, indirect overview, right? Goods, materials, manage activities. So these names down here, when you look at them, you're like, wow, these kind of look like the Fiori tiles, right? I can see profit margins by month, purchase contract expiry dates, contract leakage. So these names here, what we're doing is we're looking at the Fiori components themselves for the web and grabbing their descriptions, and they should kind of match what you expect to see on your tiles here. Like here's the description, and here's your title here. So when you look at these, you'll say my Fiori components, okay, they have names, and those are going to match things I see maybe from a Fiori Launchpad in a tile. And my transactions and my programs are the things behind that that are actually doing some of the math or actually supporting some of the T codes themselves. So ideally, what this means is we have a very complete picture now. I not only can cover execution of certified processes at traditional SAP GUI, where a lot of people are transitioning over and starting to embrace maybe a couple processes in the new Fiori. You'll have access to those. And we do think people will be in a very hybrid environment. Okay. So I actually kicked this off and let these run yesterday. And you see there's a button here, View Transaction Report, and there's the pre-report, which is disabled. So what I'm going to show you is when you get a transaction report, it's going to download in Excel spreadsheet. We're going to tell you the certified database, the project, and then your folders and your processes that were actually run. And then we'll give you the SAP transports that actually ran. And you'll see if things passed or failed. So the idea is I know that these two programs failed. So these two transports probably should not be moved into production because I had failing efforts there. So what we want to look at is for my risk, this change, this included a SAP transport plus some custom code. Is this something I can live with or not? Okay. The other thing is this report, this is another report I ran earlier, which had a lot more different transports in them. What you'll see here is in many cases, for one transport, say this 413, it's going to run from multiple different test cases. So it's okay that a transport has multiple certified processes because you may be traversing different parts of the application itself. So what you'll see here is 460, the certified delivery, I can't speak today, order and deliver bike parts test was ran, and 460, the create change delivery is done. So we're going to understand, say from a transport level, how many processes ran to test this, or if a process is used to validate more than one actual transport item. So these type of reports are really helpful because they give you an understanding of what's there. So this gives you the detailed mapping. Remember on the previous reports, I gave you like T codes and STO3 data, so you can see if something's used. In this case, we're actually seeing all the important information about which programs are running the transactions themselves. Okay. And then we have our gap analysis report. So ideally, you're going to start running these as maybe daily as transports come in. And you're going to look to have execution manager run those processes for you, say without touch. They can be scheduled in the future, or you can kick them off. And then you actually can have a better understanding of what's happening in there. Okay. So to recap, Worksoft Impact now supports full support for SAP GUI, SAP Web GUI, Web Dynpro, and these UI5 components, right? It's going to automatically identify what's changing and prioritize the tests and analyze your existing automated test coverage. It works in conjunction with Certify and Execution Manager to run those tests for you. There is no dependency on Solution Manager and complex T-bombs. We're doing the analysis ourselves. You know, some people will take a T-bomb output and then they will import that into their tool, do the analysis, and push it back and forth. But we find that's kind of a big lift. And so this is actually something we do natively in the product itself. We don't have that dependency. We will give you the gap analysis, both for T-codes and Fiori Launchpad applications that are not being validated. And then this really does help you prioritize your testing efforts. You saw with certain things, the T-codes had very high transaction rates. If you had no STO3 usage, then it's probably not something you actually need to validate itself. So it can help build that risk-based analysis for your testing.